In today's Haunting Hour, we'll be telling the folklore story that was famous in the past among sailors. It was also known among many noblemen as it was a muse for many paintings and stories that captured the allure of the sea.
Welcome back to
The second episode of What Lies in the Dark.
We Are Your Hosts,
Marisa?
Chismo.
Maritas and Mariposa.
From our last episode, we talked about the duende with our last guest, Ethan, who was kind enough to share her stories with us. Adding on to her story, we also expanded and compared the duende to the Nisei.
For our Haunting Hour segment, I will be retelling a fan story about a siren. I'd like to add mine. In 2021, I was in Montego Bay, Jamaica, and I was sitting on the beach alone during a silent lightning storm at night, and all of a sudden, I felt this intense urge to run into the water. Mind you, I don't swim. After a while, the urge intensified, and I stupidly went to put my feet in the water. I remember the water was bubbling, and it was pitch black, and I immediately felt the sense of dread and danger and ran out of the water. After getting out, I went back to sit down on my folding chair, and out of nowhere, a bolt of lightning lit up the sky and the sea. And from there, I saw a big black figure with long hair not too far away from me, staring at me from the water. After the lightning was gone, the figure was nowhere to be found. I sat out there for half an hour after trying to figure out what the figure I saw was, but it never appeared again. I really do believe it was a siren trying to take me out into the sea. The folklore creature for today is the siren.
Before we dive into today's story, we would like to introduce our friend Key. Key isn't much of a talker, but agreed to let us tell his life story throughout our podcast.
He grew up by the ocean along with his grandparents. Key loved to hear stories from his grandfather about his old travels from the sea. Key recalls the first ever story his grandfather told him. It was about a siren.
Apparently, his grandfather had a personal encounter with a siren. His grandfather's story goes, in the 19th century, there was an ongoing tale about sirens, creatures who looked like half fish and half woman. I was told that these creatures lured men into their doom with their haunting songs, but I never really thought much of it. I mean, it was probably just sailor nonsense being used to frighten people, right? One day, I went fishing with my dad, way into the afternoon. But the waters were odd that day. The water was still, a little too calm. There was a dense fog that day, and our boat drifted further from shore. Suddenly, in the middle of the dense fog, we heard a melody. At first, I thought I was hearing things, or it was simply just the wind. But suddenly, my father spotted a figure in the distance. It was a figure sitting on a jagged rock. As our boat drifted closer, I noticed it was an impossibly beautiful woman. Her skin pale and luminous even in the dim light. Her tail, shimmering with hues of blue and green, curled around the rock. She called out to my father in the sweetest tone. We were closer. My father didn't seem to notice the odd pieces of broken old ships around the woman. He looked like he simply wanted to go to her, as if he was longing to get closer. He described the feeling as if he knew her all his life. I called out asking, Who are you? My father snapped out of his current state. The siren's smile faded. Her sweet tone turned into a growl. We got scared and rushed out of there. We headed back to the shore. As we sailed away, we heard the same melody, but this time it sounded sharp, similar to nails on a chalkboard, with an unnatural growl, or an unnatural howl.
Wait, hold on. Let's backtrack a bit. Do you mean siren? The one that's half human, half bird? From the Greek mythology?
Exactly. A siren is a dangerous creature often described as a woman with wings of a bird, though later stories, like in modern day folklore, show that they also have different versions, like a half human, half fish form. However, they're still known to be a siren. These creatures live on a lonely island that is surrounded by any type of body of water. So it could be the sea, the ocean, or like lakes and rivers. They're known for their enchanting singing, which could lure sailors to their doom. By their doom, it usually means to their death. So when sailors heard the siren's song was so beautiful and hypnotic that they couldn't resist following the sound. So a lot of the stories I've read about sirens is that whenever the sailors would be sailing, they'd see a figure standing from afar, or not standing from afar, but like floating from afar, and they could hear the beautiful song coming from that area. So then they'd start sailing towards it, and this would lead to them crashing their ships into sharp rocks, or them to simply drown in the water. Their songs were basically just a deadly trap designed to tempt and mislead the sailors who have heard them, which I have already said led to like many sailors' dooms and like death. And over time, sirens have come to symbolize the dangers of giving the temptation or desire without thinking of the consequences. They show how something beautiful and alluring can sometimes lead us down to the wrong path, and how important it is to have control over our actions when faced with such temptations like this.
From what I know about sirens they are a well-known creature, and they're well known for their ethereal voices, which lure in and seduce sailors. But not only do they have beautiful voices, they also have beautiful faces, which is what makes them so powerful and dangerous. I have heard other versions of the story, the myth, where sirens are tragic creatures who are cursed to sing for eternity, while others see them as completely malicious, using their charms to manipulate men into their deaths. What do you guys think about the way sirens are portrayed? Do you think their attitude towards sailors are purely malicious, too?
Sirens are originally from Greek mythology. However, the depiction of sirens changed over time. According to an article I found called From Birdwoman to Mermaid, the shifting image of the medieval siren. In this article, it mentions that during the Middle Ages, the story of sirens changed from its classical status as half-bird, half-woman creature to what many now see as an alluring mermaid, simply because of social and artistic interpretations. As Maritas mentioned, sirens are a symbol of temptation or desire. They are alluring and manipulative. A great example of this kind of person with this kind of characteristic is the character from My Little Mermaid. You guys know Ursula? She was the antagonist and was Ariel's aunt.
Ursula? Really? What does she have to do with sirens?
She's nowhere near being a siren, but her attitude and tactics are similar to one. She uses manipulative tactics to get what she wants and used this to her advantage and took Ariel's voice to seduce Prince Eric, who fell for the temptation of Ursula's newfound voice.
That's interesting because it makes me wonder about the different depictions of sirens. You brought up Ursula and the classic traits sirens share, but what about the other variations? For instance, if we're talking about the woman half fish, in other words, the mermaids, is there significant difference between the mermaid and the siren? From my research, mermaids are more often seen as more benign, more curious, or even more hopeful. While on the other hand, sirens are always more dangerous and manipulative. I guess the line really gets blurry when you think about the modern interpretation of both. In some cases, they're basically the same, right? But the story behind them is so different. It makes me wonder if the mermaid label is just a modern twist on the old idea, more reasonable with less inherent danger.
Some characteristics sirens has, as I've said, is their ability to sing and their voice. Their songs are so beautiful and hypnotic that they can draw anyone who hears them into a trance, causing them to lose all sense of direction or reason. This usually would mean as I've said, always usually applies to sailors, because those are the people that are always near a body of water or at a body of water. Sailors who are at sea for long stretches of time would hear the songs from far away and, unable to resist, would steer their ships toward the island where the sirens lived. As I've mentioned before, sirens lived on islands that were surrounded by bodies of water, and the islands didn't look pretty. The islands were surrounded by sharp rocks, and along with the sharp rocks you would see other shipwrecks that have been destroyed because of the siren. The characteristics that I think really define sirens is their beautiful and tempting voices. It's pretty much irresistible, and it's very impressive how it's the fact that they can just sing a tune and that it'll just take over someone's complete state of mind. And it's like that one girl from Umbrella Academy where her power is whenever she says like, oh, I heard a rumor, and then she says whatever after that, they'll follow, like the person she says it to will follow her command. It's like that, and it's crazy to me how people like actually not succumb, but like just fully like give into that and just steer towards the island. Another characteristic that sirens have is their connection to the sea. Sirens are usually portrayed as living on isolated islands surrounded by the sea or like any body of water, and these islands are often in places that are difficult to reach or dangerous to navigate, which only adds to their mystique and danger. Well, speaking of mystique and danger, don't you just wonder why the sirens treat sailors like this in the first place? One reason the siren treats sailors this way is that they represent temptation itself. Their songs are so beautiful that they draw people in, making them forget about their duties, their safety, and the dangers around them. The siren call is a symbol of how tempting desires can lead people off course, away from what's important or safe, and into peril. This is why they target sailors. Sailors represent people who are on a journey or mission, but the siren song leads them astray. The idea is that temptation, when unchecked, can have disastrous consequences. Another reason is their desire for control. Sirens are often portrayed as creatures who gain power over sailors by using their voices, essentially controlling those who hear them. This gives them a certain power over human fate. The sirens' treatment of sailors can be as an expression of this power. They use their enchanting songs to take control of the sailors' actions, pulling them to destruction without any regard for the sailors' lives. It's almost as if the sirens are asserting dominance over those who try to pass by their domain.
What Lies in the Dark will be back after the short little interview.
I heard like in behind my cousin's house, they said they have copper in there.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah,
How did you guys feel about that thought?
of course it's too scary, right? And then I know like there's like sometimes they have like accident. Like you get an accident today, and then the next week, my cousin got sick again.
sick?
I think they said behind their house there's a capre, and then of course if they want something,
Yeah.
you gotta get sick. Like they call it like usog,
So,
something
yeah.
like that. Then after that, if somebody or aswang,
As well, yes.
and then if you know somebody, if they do like that to you, you need to answer back,
Yeah.
or else you gotta get
Or
usog.
you cook usog?
And then sometimes you need to tell to that lady, oh, you sug her. So you need to, like, your saliva, you need to put in your stomach, something like that.
Welcome back to
Story Swap.
As part of our podcast segment, we're going to be comparing and contrasting the siren and the mermaid. The idea of mermaid. It is odd how people just easily get manipulated by beautiful melodies. But there could also be another reason. So, you remember how Chisma said there was a blurry line between the different or more modern interpretation of the sirens? How people just believe sirens and mermaids are basically the same. Well, actually, mermaids are seen as the nicer counterpart of sirens. They are, as people know, half fish, half human. So like Ariel, basically. It says they are known to be guardians and protectors of the sea. It was said that unlike sirens who manipulate using their alluring voices and beautiful faces, mermaids are said to guide those at sea and warn them of any potential dangers. So, what if sailors that heard the voices of a siren, saw their appearance, yet remained unfazed simply because they've heard of the good deeds of mermaids? However, mermaids are still said to be creatures people should be cautious around, since they could play tricks on you. Although the tricks can be harmless and are just poking fun at people, there is still the saying that these guardians of the sea will punish those disrespecting the sea. We have here Chismo retelling a fan story about a mermaid.
One afternoon, I was swimming in the ocean when a strong wave knocked me under, and I couldn't get back up. Panic set as I swallowed water, and I felt myself sinking. Just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, I felt a gentle pull on my arm. Looking up, I saw a mermaid. Her long hair flowing like the waves, she grabbed my hand with a surprising strength and pulled me towards the surface. As I gasped for air, she smiled softly, her eyes full of calm. She guided me back to the shore before I could say anything, and she vanished beneath the water, leaving only ripples behind. I was safe, and I knew I had been saved by something magical.
In other words, the difference between the two creatures isn't about their looks, but their attitude towards humans. The sirens, as we said, are the symbols of temptation and show the consequences if one can't control such desires. Their beauty and allure make people disregard their safety and daggers around them. The siren call is a symbol of how tempting desires can lead people astray and into a watery grave. This could be why they target sailors, people on a journey or mission, with the intent to make them forget everything. The sirens are said to desire control over their prey, leading them further from their goals without any regard for their lives. As the prey fall for their desires, their faith weakens. However, on the other side, as Chismo had mentioned, are cursed creatures forced to sing for eternity. So what if that were the case? Do you think they are exactly like the stories? A monster, or perhaps just misunderstood? Do you think their attitudes and actions towards sailors were purely malicious, or was it simply a cry for help?
Keep your ears open and stay tuned for the next episode of What Lies in the Dark.